e nā mana, e nā reo, e nā waka, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ki te whare, e tūnei, te nākoe. Ki te marae, e nora nei, te nākoe. Haere, e nā mate, haere, haere, haere. Ki te hunga ora, e koe mā, e koro mā, e rorangatira mā, tēnā koutou katoa. So, as a mode of interpretation, I think it's important. I've welcomed you here this morning in our first language of this country, Aotearoa, which is Te Reo Māori. I've acknowledged all the powers that be here today, all the authorities, and all the voices, and in particularly the diversity and all the languages that you bring to this space today. I've also addressed not just you as individuals, but the people you represent. So you just don't stand here today as an individual, you represent people. So I've also addressed your elders, all your superiors, who've all made it happen that you're here today through your journey through life. And importantly, I've addressed your ancestors. So we meet today not just as humans and people, but our ancestors meet today. And by that, what's important about that is that we acknowledge not just the physical realm, but the spiritual realm. So, and that might involve whatever state you're in here today, and you could have lost a loved one. And this process is about allowing you to feel safe here today and respecting who you are and all the people you represent. So welcome, welcome, welcome. And we have a white.
Kotama ki mato, kotama ki mato, kotama ki mato, kaora e, oh my toringa, oh my toringa, oh my toringa, kaora e, mate aroha, mate aroha, mate aroha, kaora e.
Nō reira, kua mutu rā, tēnei mihi, noha ora mai, kia ora.
Kia ora.
The big disasters, but the relevance to what happens year in, year out around the world. Not a lot of learnings there. So you will take some learnings away today, and when you go back on the ship, you got some DVDs. You can actually get some learnings on the big disasters. But I think the key issue in disaster management, clearly is don't build and live in a disaster risk. And with 7 billion people currently in the world and rising, that's a physical possibility. Ancient civilizations built where there's earthquakes. People build in floodplains because the rivers were the major source of commerce. People build in geotechnical unstable areas because that's sometimes where the best land is to grow your crops. People live in fault lines because sometimes that was the cheapest land to develop. And it's just absolutely around the world. So if the world was going to have disaster risk management, you would just stop people actually living, building and developing. and that isn't going to happen, as you know, if you reflect back to your own countries of origin. So I guess you can do some things, and you would certainly be part of your studies. You can at least build a building that won't fall when there is no earthquake, when there is no significant wind, and they're falling every day somewhere in the world because of shoddy standards and shoddy building. So there's lots of things in disaster risk management that can actually mitigate the risk to the communities that you live in and you're a part of. But quite clearly, what you're going to learn today, as I understand it with your day with us, is key thing is you need to identify your hazards. You need to know where they are. If you don't know where they are, that's going to be a significant problem. And every now and again there's an example where, gosh, we didn't know that was going to happen. And Christchurch in 2011 was an example in New Zealand where everyone knew that Christchurch was an earthquake sensitive zone, the whole of New Zealand is, but it wasn't the high earthquake sensitive zone, it was medium. And it wasn't a big earthquake in the context of scale, 5.7 from memory, but in the context of how earthquakes work, it was truly significant for New Zealand and quite a tragic event. And I've often seen in anything that I've worked in that when the barbarian's at the gate, so that's when the politicians start to focus, are the gate strong enough to keep them out? And that made some significant changes to emergency management in New Zealand, and in fact there's been amendment to the legislation. So clearly identify your hazards. If I'm trying to actually get it down to 3 sentences so that you can say, oh well, I don't need to study all the textbooks, I've learned something. Identify your hazard, mitigate your risk, and clearly if you can afford it, don't live in the floodplain, don't live in the tsunami zone. And if you do want to live on the beach, which is a beautiful view, the most expensive property, but obviously the highest risk, make sure you got your escape route set out, or there's some hills quite close. You know, build safely, and that's something around the world that isn't really focused on in some countries, as you'd be aware. Be ready and prepared. It's part of the 5 R's. And I guess we're just working through a process now. We're having a presentation tomorrow by one of our managers, Arnie over there, on resilience. All very well to do all those things, but if resilience is how an individual or community bounces back from adversity, that's really the key. After all those other issues, some of which you can control, some of which you can't. But if you can grow resilience in your community, it's a key part of disaster risk management. Not something that I understand was spoken of 10 years ago. Disaster risk management was very much a control process that wasn't the community were there to be instructed as against to assist themselves. So the whole world of disaster risk management changes rapidly in the Western world particularly. And in the non-Western world, most of those communities, part of everyday life is helping your community. So we can learn from them. It's one of the few occasions when we have to do a reverse engineering, go to those areas where the community is still important, and that's what we have got to try and generate in Auckland. So I'll leave it there. I hope you enjoy your day. I'm sure you will. And if you leave here today just knowing one thing, your day has not been wasted. And I think you'll learn 3 things. I've just given you 3. So therefore the KPIs, you've got to leave here with 5 things, okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
That, as well as the climate change agreement, so particularly for us how hazard and risk is changing with climate change. And then that comes through into the Sendai framework, which we have a commitment to as New Zealand, to reduce disaster risk, the losses that occur from that. And so that is filtered down into our national resilience strategy. And we use that strategy as well as our Auckland plan. So for Auckland Council, we combine those two to make what becomes our group plan. So our group plan, it focuses on the 4 R's, as well as the 5th R of resilience, which is a specific goal for Auckland. So that includes resilience across all 4 environments. So natural, social, built, economic. And then Auckland has a particular approach to community resilience. And so our resilience manager, Annie, is going to talk to you a little bit about that and how that works for Auckland Civil Defence.
Our director, John, and I'm not going to test you on the 3 things he taught you, he mentioned something about the diversity of Auckland's population. And really, 200 cultures and growing in this place that we love as home as Tamaki Makaurau. So as well as the really strong tangata whenua heritage, we're a city that's just really dynamic. And also you'll really get a sense, I'm sure, that Auckland for New Zealand is a really large city in terms of population. So currently we have a population of 1.6 million, which for a little place like Aotearoa is huge, and it's growing by about 3% every year. So at Auckland Civil Defence Emergency Management, and as well as Auckland Council, because we all work together, we've got a real challenge of, how do we actually get scale to really be able to engage and communicate meaningfully with this population that's just growing so large every year, as well as the fact of, how do we understand how best to engage in a way that's actually meaningful with over 200 cultures. So that's, part of our challenge. And so one of the things that we really need to be aware of in anything new that we try is how do we get that sense of scale and diversity. So really what we're doing, and we've got this, Emma referred to this plan, and I'm sure you'll get to look at this today. This is our group plan, which really sets out our vision of Resilient Auckland. And with that sort of scale, and with that level of wonderful diversity, you can see it's all about how do we work together. We've got a team of 30 or so of us here in Civil Defence Emergency Management, and as well as Auckland Council, we're still not going to get the numbers. So for us, it's really about working with those in community, other stakeholder groups like Red Cross, St. John, working with as many different groups as we can to try and say, okay, what's really going to make the difference? And my understanding of what really makes a difference from having lived in a really connected community is, yes, we need to be aware of our risks, and yes, we need to mitigate them as much as possible and not develop in areas which we realise aren't the best choices given the risk. However, what's really probably also going to make the difference is not just our preparedness in a formal way, but the way that we help each other out. Because in the end, that's what it's all about. We're all going to be in this sort of stuff together. So it's about how do we connect. So I know from living in a small connected community that whether or not we had officially or formally written a plan and got all our preparedness kits sorted and understand our risks, I just know that we would all just get in together with this really positive mindset of we can help each other out. So what we're doing is working out how we can best communicate more effectively with our different cultures on scale, and using whatever we can in terms of social media or using leaders in communities, going where people already are and bringing our messages. But often we also struggle in Auckland because of the relevancy. It's a sense of nothing's really going to happen here. We don't have a lot of real experience, and I'm sure some of you really will have, of things that have really gone badly in terms of emergency. So one of the approaches we really have is, okay, all the things that we do to prepare, they also make everyday life better. Knowing your neighbours, understanding each other's diversity more, and really kind of respecting our differences as strength and working together is really actually making everyday life feel a lot better. You know, you can get quite lonely in a big city like Auckland. You probably know that feeling too if you live in a really big city. So we're trying to work out how we can really get some quick wins and use scale. However, we're also working on some projects that are really new for civil defence emergency management, and that is really, we're calling them pilots, where we're testing out really different ways of doing things. For example, working with our Chinese communities in terms of what this thing is that we call resilience. What does it even mean to you being Chinese? How does that even communicated? And what is it that actually is going to work for Chinese communities that's actually going to support and assist a way that they would most comfortably and naturally want to look after each other and those around them? And with other, so we're doing that with some Chinese community leaders as well as working with other groups of culturally and linguistically diverse communities. And also trying to work out how do we engage and excite youth more. You know, because we all know youth are the best way to influence those around each other and their family, their whānau. So we're trying new things, that we're being experimental, we're trying to be very brave, and then what we want to be able to do is anything that we can learn, because we've got a lot to learn, how can we then scale it so we can try and keep up with that population growth? And the fact that, you know, in 5 years' time we'll probably have 250 cultures in Auckland. So I'm excited to be able to chat with you later in the morning. And please.
5 R's. A common question that I get all the time is, emergencies hardly ever happen. What do you do all day? Do you just sit back and have your feet on the desks? Well, some of the time. No, I'm kidding. But this is what we do the rest of the time, and it's covered in the 4 R's. First, we have reduction. Who knows what reduction means? Yeah, shout out, interactive. Yep, reducing the risks. How do you think we might do that in Auckland? Yep, so I put some testing or exercising before an emergency. Yep, that's one way. It actually comes past in the readiness phase, but I'll discuss that a bit more. Any other ones?
Adjust
Sorry,
infrastructure.
building code, did you say? Yep, that's a fantastic example, building codes. So in New Zealand we have some of the highest building codes in the world regarding our seismic risk. Predominantly mainly in the South Island, but we also get earthquakes up in the North Island as well as all other things, so wind hazards, also liquefaction and that type of things. So we need to ensure that our buildings are up to a certain standard so they can survive any potential disaster or an emergency. That's a great one. Anything else? We go along the planning lines? Yep. great observations. We'll get to that shortly. Sorry, awareness? Yeah, that's a great one. So how do we understand our hazards? What research do we conduct to understand our volcanic threat? What if we don't know something? Do we know when the next volcanic eruption is going to occur?
Historical analysis and probably
exactly.
land water escapes that you have that bring you to risks, rivers, any natural risks.
Yeah. So all the research and the investigations that go into that is part of our ability to reduce the risks. Another key one is land use planning. So we heard from John a minute ago about how ancient cultures built in threatening areas, so by the coasts where it was close to food, but that also increases our risk from the likes of tsunamis, storm surge, coastal inundation. It's also more exposed to weather. What are we thinking about then? Is our historical knowledge long enough to compare it to our geological knowledge? So that's all part of reducing the risks or eliminating the risks of them occurring. Walls, flood banks, building dams, but you do have to be careful when trying to implement these types of measures because they can also increase the risk. You have rivers as a classic example in building stop banks. If you narrow the river, you increase sedimentation. The river bed starts rising. We have numerous examples in the South Island of actually rivers that have now risen above the height of the surrounding town. So if we were to get a flood in the future, it would actually be 10 times more worse than it was before we put those mitigation strategies in place. Same with seawalls, the maintenance costs. Yep, perfect. So we'll head on to readiness now. So you hit 2 of the readiness buttons already, which is exercising and early warning systems. So Auckland has a range of early warning systems that we use here. Some of them you'll be able to see demonstrated shortly when we go through an exercise. This allows us to alert not only our staff and stakeholders, but also the public of any potential events that occur. And it also ties back to our reduction phase. What do we know about earthquakes? Could we send out a public alert for an earthquake? Do we know that an earthquake is going to occur? So we are subject to those limitations as well. So, yes?
Do you have early warning systems that are monitored by the communities, or are they monitored by you guys?
Yeah. Most of them are monitored by scientific agencies, unless there's something in particular that a private community member might have established. So we have a number of community groups around the region, and sometimes they implement their own alerting mechanisms, whether that be through a telephone tree of the community about significant issues occurring, or if it's contact with our elected members, and we try and tap into that as much as possible as well. Cool. So response, the next R. So response is actually responding to an earthquake, or sorry, any emergency. And we do that on a almost a daily basis, sometimes ranging from scale, from traffic, which is the greatest emergency in Auckland, to major events like tsunamis or volcanic eruptions. Some of them we don't get involved in at all. For example, traffic. We just make sure that we don't go home at a certain time that the traffic's building up. And then some of them we have a more active involvement in. We also support our partner agencies. So you've got the classic natural hazards, but we also have technological hazards. So what happens if there's a road accident or a bridge failure? What about a biological hazard? Pandemic? Agricultural pest? You might have heard of the Queensland fruit fly. We get a whole lot of Australians infesting our country, so we have to eradicate those as much as possible. So we do get involved in a lot of diverse type of hazards as well. We'll respond to those. So our response is working within our emergency coordination centre, and I'm going to show you some examples of emergency coordination centres shortly. But you're sitting in one right now. This is our primary emergency coordination centre, but we actually have 4 of these at different scales as well. And then you have recovery. What's recovery?
Dealing with the consequences.
Yep, that's pretty much it. What happens afterwards? And it starts at the same time as response. So if you're evacuating a population out of a specific area, recovery focuses on how you're going to look after those people. Where are they going to be housed? What support do they need? Immediate, short term, medium term, and long term. Financial arrangements. People are significantly impacted during a disaster, and our role is to support them through it, so they can recover as soon as possible. These 4 R's, or known as the 4 areas of activities, is the basis of emergency management in New Zealand. If we were to achieve these 4 R's, we achieve the overall R of resilience. And the overarching R is resilience. So that's our common goal, that's our strategic vision, is to increase resilience by these activities. You may have been introduced to this on your ship, if I'm not mistaken. So here we talk about the Coordinated Incident Management System, or SIMS. They like it for short. We have a lot of acronyms, so hopefully I'm not using too many today. So I'm just going to go through SIMS, but SIMS was developed on the basis of some international frameworks as well, You have the ICS, or the Instant Command System, used in the States. You also have the Australian Interagency Coordinated Incident Management System. So they're all the same thing. But their primary purpose is to ensure that all agencies are working off the same playbook, off the same page, so that when we talk about the key roles, such as a controller, if we go speak to the logistics manager, any agency responding to that emergency will know what that means. As you can imagine, there's a lot of different terminologies, lots of different structures within agencies, and they're all individually run, owned and maintained. And so this puts us all on the same page during the response. So to go through it quickly, the controller, head honcho at the top. You met our primary controller earlier, that was John Dragisevich. He's responsible for the overall response. Similar to a CEO in a large corporate organisation, he's responsible for all the activities that belong there, and for the safety and well-being of the community as well as the staff responding. Then you have the response manager. A response manager is like a 2IC, or a deputy controller. He usually takes the place of the controller when the controller wants to get some sleep, but also when there's any additional tasks. The response manager is also responsible for maintaining the ECC and ensuring that all tasks are being completed. So really important. Technical experts. So technical experts in New Zealand are those from institutions like GNS Science, who monitors our geological and physical hazards, but also could be other experts. Don't know how many of you have heard about the Pipe River mine disaster, where a couple of miners got trapped in a mine. There's a huge SIMS response for that one as well, coordinated or led by the police. The technical experts in that situation were mine experts over from Australia. For biological or agricultural pests, usually it's someone like an entomologist. It can be anyone. Dam safety inspectors, oceanographers, you name it, they go in there. The next function we have is risk. It's really important that we minimise risk, not only the physical risk to people and property from the obvious hazards like glass or brick or mortar, but also our reputational and our public information image. We have a public information function as well, they get highly involved in that. But you can have a really poorly run disaster and it be seen as a well-managed event purely by the public information that we provide. If we sell ourselves properly, we can reduce the stress on the public because they think we're doing a good job. The opposite also exists. We could do a marvellous job in here, hit all the buttons, do it perfectly, but if our public information is not at that high level, the public will perceive us as being poor at our job. So that's where the risk, safety and reputation function comes in. They're responsible for ensuring that the intelligence function. They're responsible for understanding what's happening outside of these four walls. This is one of the hardest things to do in an emergency, is what's actually happening. As technology improves, more and more data is becoming available. We know things from how much rain is falling to pretty much what you're doing at home through social media. If you're baking a cake, usually you know if you post it on Instagram. What food you're eating, all those food images, we can track that down. So the intelligence manager is responsible for gaining information about the event. The planning manager looks at what we're actually going to do when we respond. So they take that information and go, this is how we should best respond. Its primary focus is in the medium to long term. We're not going to respond to a tsunami event and just say, just wait 1 second, we're just going to plan it and take 3 or 4 days doing that. There's some common sense applied. So planning managers primarily in the medium to long term time scale, and also focuses on recovery. The operations manager is responsible for the coordination and actions of agencies on the ground. So they're the ones actually out there, the police, the fire service, your utility companies. So we call these lifelines. So that's your services like electricity, power, wastewater, sewage, transport, airports, ports, rail. The list goes on. So the people actually responding to your actual needs. A common question that we used to get in emergencies, like the Christchurch earthquake, that we had a person in the community that asked, we had the power utilities company come by our house, we had the police come by, we even had the fire service, we even had the local board member, but we didn't see one civil defence vehicle drive past our house, and you guys are the ones responsible for responding in an emergency. A little bit disheartening, isn't it? But what the public don't realise is that civil defence were all those people. Civil defence were the police. Civil defence was the fire service. Civil defence was even the utilities. Civil defence is even the community, by the community helping. And so that's what we're working on educating at the moment. So in order to undertake these operations, we need resources. And to do that, we need a logistics function or a logistics manager to coordinate those resources. If we want any heavy lift helicopter, specialist mining equipment, a helicopter, if we want pens and paper, the logistics function sorts that out for us. The PIM manager or the public information manager is responsible, as I said earlier, for anything from the public perception side. So that's anything to do with the media, such as VIP visits, any mayors, deputy mayors, political interaction. They're responsible for coordinating all of that. And now the important part from that perspective is the influence of social media. That's a huge influence on emergency management these days. Not only by sending information out, but also receiving information. And then we have the welfare manager. So the welfare manager is responsible for the coordination of welfare agencies. So these agencies are the likes of our tax revenue department, financial support, so we call that WINS, Working Income New Zealand, Ministry of Social Development, animal welfare, household goods and services, they need toiletries, toothbrush, toothpaste. They're responsible for coordinating all those actions and those agencies. And altogether you have the SIMS framework or the SIMS leadership team. And we'll go through that slightly later on as well. So next I'm just going to go through each of the coordination centres separately. We'll go next one. So the first one is the incident control point. So the incident control point is usually established at a site or a scene in the event. Now depending on the scale of the event, for example if you have a large earthquake, it could be a specific building. For those familiar with the Christchurch earthquake, the CTV building was a classic example of this, is that they set an ICP up for the CTV building, Christchurch. In Auckland, it could be a ICP to respond to a specific building here. It could be this building. If this building collapses, we might establish an ICP. Or another response that we established ICPs for were the biological or the agricultural pests. We didn't actually use this little unit here. We used a facility just out of town, but same sort of setup. Mobile command centre. So this is our one in Auckland. We call it the Green Rig, or the Beast, depending on who you talk to. This is a fully operational command unit where you can coordinate operations. So it has access to telecommunications, computers, and other technology in order to respond on the scene. For a large scale event, this won't be suitable. It'll be too small. But for the small events, such as just within a few square blocks, if our partner agencies like the police or the fire service are responding to a fire or a car accident that's taking a couple of hours to respond to or a couple of days, then they have the ability to use this. If it gets bigger, we then activate emergency operations centres. Now in New Zealand we have different scales of response and different authorities managing the response. So in Auckland we're actually an amalgamated authority. In other regions in New Zealand you also have another level, which are your local authorities and your district councils. In Auckland it's slightly different, so we don't have as many EOCs. But for us that would be our agencies. So the police, the fire service, Auckland Council, Lifeline Utilities, they may all establish their own type of coordination centre to manage their own activities. Here we coordinate the activities, so we can provide priorities. So for the police, we want them to respond to the evacuation of hundreds and thousands of residents. But they need their own operations centre to just manage that one task. So that's why we establish emergency operations centre. I like putting this picture up here. This is not a picture from Auckland. It's actually a picture from Christchurch. This is the emergency coordination centre in Canterbury, actually. Environment Canterbury runs this. This was a purpose-built, multifunctional, multi-agency building. It had its own air reticulation system. It had technology, its own wireless connectivity, could connect anywhere. Its own, like I said, air filtration system. It was a bunker, it was underground, it was earthquake proof, it was bomb proof. It was pretty much flood proof. You couldn't knock this building down. It was purpose built exactly for it. But it wasn't used during the Christchurch earthquake. Does anyone know why?
Nope.
What about the buildings next door to it? So this is actually situated on either side of this building. Are great two huge buildings, both red-carded during the Christchurch earthquake, so they couldn't use it. So it's really important that when planning for a disaster, you build in redundancies. No matter how perfect you think that facility is, there's always a way that surprises you, which is why we have multiple facilities. This one. So the next level up is the emergency coordination centre. You're sitting in one. Part of that redundancy is we've established another one. And this is based in Te Atatū, which is on the east coast of India. I have a small map up here for those that can see it. Just says confirm or verify the information, which is an important part of the process. Then we have our CCTV cameras. We have when I say it's also utilising our networks with Auckland Transport and also Auckland Events, I think, have a couple of cameras, and we're tapped into there. This provides situational awareness of what's happening on the ground because we can't see it there manually as well. And then over on the far side, what do we have? We have a helicopter tracking system, so we have rescue helicopters across New Zealand, and we have the ability to track these as well as certain vehicles as well, which provides us with a tracking mechanism for resources. And then at the other end, it's our USGS website. And most of these are used during a response to an event like a tsunami, which is what we're going to go through shortly. But before we do, I'm just going to
Keith, response manager.
Yep.
Have we got him on line?
Yep, Pim's on the line, Kerry's here.
We've got hazards.
Yeah.
Can we confirm, is this real or is this not real?
Considering 9.2, I treat it as serious
Yep.
threat. Let me just double check.
Can we check USGS, nanometrics and also Geonet? Anyone here felt it?
No, I didn't.
Okay, can we stand by to do full evacuation East Coast messaging? As soon as we get confirmation from hazards, we'll go on that. MacDem will most likely be looking at full activation, and if we do confirm this, we'll also look at full grid and then the declaration for an evacuation plan. Hazards, first priority, let me know if this is confirmed.
Okay, Keith here, response manager. Dion as duty officer, can you be responsible for public messaging?
Just creating the event now.
Because of the magnitude 9.2, we will be considering the Ministry's advice on all evacuate East Coast, Auckland region. Confirm 9.2, all evacuate East Coast, Auckland region, as per the Ministry's directive. Matthew,
Yeah,
can you be responsible for stakeholder messaging, both internal and external?
Yeah.
Kerry here, Pim. Just been monitoring the social media sphere. Twitter is going crazy at the moment. Lots of people have felt it.
Aaron here, we've got confirmation that it is greater than 8, it is in that area, so we are to go with full evacuation East Coast of Auckland. Public messaging, press statements, internal and external, chopper airborne, and
see what it was actually like during our realistic type exercise. So just go and so, yep, now get someone just to press play, just one clip should be fine.
Turn on the speakers.
I'm just going to get the music.
Stand by. Don't wait for this. Got a green light. Green light. Green battery light.
A waves measuring between 6 to 8 metres hit Great Barrier Island. A local state of emergency was declared at 9:20. The role of control is effectively to direct and coordinate resources to respond to the emergency, in this case a tsunami.
My role as Planning and Intelligence Manager is to take all of the information that's coming in from various different sources, try and interpret that and to try and make sense of it and pass it on to decision makers.
And it's all about that coordination so we can get all of these agencies responding in Auckland going on a single pathway.
As the Lifelines coordinator, my job is to speak to all of the network utilities out there, and I act as a coordination point between them to make sure that people are sharing information, helping each other out when they can.
We know in our history we have had a number of tsunamis, and we also believe even before recording there were some major tsunamis that have occurred.
A earthquake triggered off the coast of New Zealand in the Kermadec Trench, which is effectively northeast.
Very quickly after we heard that the earthquake had hit, we used our modelling data, and we did find out very quickly afterwards that there was a tsunami on the way.
It's a wave with 100 kilometres of energy behind it, so very, very destructive. It is the most significant wave ever to hit Auckland in recorded history.
Initial notification that public messaging went out really, really quickly, and for me that's what's going to save lives.
So we know that about 120,000 people may need to be evacuated in a pretty short period of time.
We've just had information through that the wave has hit Omaha. As soon as more information comes through with regards to the impact in Omaha, we'll let you know.
What I want is for Craig to effectively update us.
So the wave has hit Great Barrier Island and Omaha. The other impacts are literally minutes away.
What is the predicted wave height for Auckland?
3.5 metres to 7.5 metres.
Some very sophisticated modelling tools here in Auckland Civil Defence, which allowed us to determine where those waves were likely to hit, what their likely effects would be, and the number of people who are in those areas.
Social media is extremely busy at the moment. We're receiving information through social media, providing it to our intelligence teams. And we will need to talk about potential for a media conference or stand up at some stage in the future.
We can go in straight away and send a whole lot of alerts out. It then links into social media, Facebook, Twitter. That also links into things like the Auckland Rescue Helicopter Trust, or a tsunami siren we have on the helicopter, and we've got tsunami sirens in some parts of Auckland, and then we get into the actual extra mandatory media broadcasting and stuff. So we're trying to do as many channels as possible in a short time frame as possible.
And we do have some really great partnerships with our external partners, such as the police, fire, and ambulance, etc.
In the affected areas, the troops are on the ground assessing the damage and the potential for recovery and rescue.
All our staff have been paged to let us know of any update, what they see as the wave hits our area.
They can only really evacuate them to where the line is at this stage, and then they'll look at relocating them after that point.
Yeah, we have 3 civil defence centres opened up. We have QBE Stadia, Eden Park in the central area, and Vodafone Events Centre to the south.
If you don't think